Muted. To finance.
There we go. Okay. We are now in session for a special meeting for June 27th, 2023 of the Clear Creek County Board of County Commissioners. The first item for the day is public comment. Do we have any public comment? Seeing none in the room.
No one online?
No one online. Okay. The next item is consideration of approval of valuation adjustment for Bighorn Townhomes. Donna G., assessor.
Good morning. I ran 14 comparables based on the dollar amounts because they're all very similar. With returning to the prior value, the tax revenue would have been $79.30 and 26 cents. With the comparables, the tax revenue will be $15,083,720. And the loss of revenue from returning to the prior value and going to the comparable values is $3,163.
Per unit?
3 cents
Per unit?
overall
Over 14 units?
for 60.
Oh,
For the 60 units. Running the comparables on it, if they decide they want to go to the BAA, that's going to be your stronger suit for if we have to go down to the Board of Assessment Appeals, is using comparables referring to go back to the prior value.
Oh, so if we go back to the prior value and they challenge it, we don't have a leg to stand on.
We'd have to run comparables anyway.
so by going with the comparables now, the best set of comparables that we've got, we have the strongest case of whatever we decide of that decision holding up.
Correct. And it is just, it's a loss of revenue of $3,163 over all the 60 accounts. If we went back to the prior value. Because the total with the prior value is $15,712,750 is our actual value. And doing the comparables, the actual value for the 60 accounts is $15,083,720. And then I calculated using the new assessment rate of 6.7%. That's the new assessment rate for 2023, 6.795 on the ballot for 6.7, using the mill levy for 2022.
Can you go back to that first number again? The second number was 15,083,000 and change. What was the?
Correct. First one was 15,712 and change, which is a difference of $629,030.
Right. So. Okay. Thoughts?
Can I have the actual value again?
The actual value for 2022, $15,712,750.
Thank you.
Are you okay with the 23 value?
Is that the 15?
That's with the
3,720?
Yes, that's with the comparables.
Okay.
I mean, this might, I don't know. I want to dig in a little bit more to the legal question of what happens if we're challenged. I wonder, is this the right setting to do that, Peter?
I'd rather discuss it offline initially. I don't know that there's much to address.
Because, I mean, you made the statement that if we go back to, if we just revert back to the 2022 values, that's probably not defensible in an appeals process.
It is not.
And so the question, I would dig into that a little bit more, because if taken on its face, that would be a strong argument to not do this, right? And then go lose 60 cases. We could either dig into that question or just accept that. I think that would be a strong argument that the decision in front of us is either go reassess all those properties or move forward with the values that you already have through your last assessment.
I've been to the BAA before, and they're going to require comparables.
So would you have the option to, if at any point you want me to make a motion, to go into executive session, I will.
Okay, this is fine.
If we have the option, I guess I can't make that motion.
That's the first thing that popped into my head. But that's okay.
It's fine to have this discussion. I think we're just talking.
I'm open to it. I'm open to Peter adding it to the list of things that we talked to because actually what I should have done before I opened this session was say, and Peter has something to read about an executive session here, so.
It's all right. We can continue with this hearing and then I'll do it after. It's fine.
Yeah, and I'm glad that we had this discussion first.
Yeah.
Before we did that.
So if you end up with a challenge, do you have the opportunity to run comparables then?
Yes.
Okay, and that's a less strong argument.
So just to clarify, so either way, comparables have to be run and supported, which Donna's already done comparables at this point. The challenge will be if they disagree with the assessment. Ultimately, it's like any other change. The issue will be, will we have 60 hearings or not? Most counties right now are dealing with similar circumstances.
And in our defense, the values are, I have a difference here for you in the columns in your attachment. The values are going down a little bit from the 2022 values, while property is increasing in everywhere in the state. So they are seeing a little bit of a decrease. So I do believe we have a strong case if somebody does protest the suggested value.
I mean, I think my larger concern is knowing sort of that we have our arms around sort of two things. One is how it happened and is it limited to these 60 properties?
Yes, it's limited to these 60 properties. And running some of the comparables, it looked like it has to do with the condition of the properties. If they are, we have them in good condition, fair condition, or very good condition. And when I looked at some of the comparables, if the condition is good, it came right in line where I feel it should be based on the comparables and the sales that are out there. Now, if there was a condition that was fair, it seemed to be a little bit lower than what I'm seeing for the sales. So how I think it happened is probably due a little bit of me learning curve and because of the condition for this area. And I only had a couple that were fair. The good ones were right in line where they should be and have a strong case for their value.
What's the overall reduction in property tax that will be collected based on the assessment?
So if we went back to the prior value, the tax revenue would be 79,030.26. With the comparables, it's, excuse me, the revenue for the comparables is 75,866. So if we went with the comparables versus returning to the 2022 value, it's a difference of loss of revenue of $3,163
Oh, I misheard that.
Total.
total for all 60 properties.
can't mobilize.
And again, that's using the 2022 mill levy.
It's really only $50 a property. That seems almost exactly equal.
Yeah, the loss in revenue from doing the compare is only $3,000 overall.
To me, that's the same as no difference in the scheme of things.
Yeah, it's not that much of a difference. It's actual value, it's $629,000. In actual value, not revenue.
The revenue is the assessment times that amount. So,
Correct.
yeah, got it. And the mill levy. So, yeah,
Correct.
3,000.
And-
So you're basically saying $3,000 in property taxes on 629,000.
Correct.
Am I looking at this right when I read? I'm just looking at the comparable account number 00117. Addition fair,
Yep,
previous value 225,000.
correct.
That was the 2022 value.
That's correct.
And $106,070 is the value that your comparables are showing today.
That's the value that it dropped to, which is not a good value based on the sales overall.
That's the currently assessed value. That's not.
That's the current assessed value that I feel is incorrect and why I'm here today.
Thank you. Just wanted to make sure I understood that. Because I was trying to.
And on that 1176, the most comparable is the first column with the 209,390 value.
Right.
And as you can see there, the condition is a big adjustment. And that's why I think that this was an issue in this area. And $7,000 adjustment.
Maybe I'm missing something, but we're saying that the current condition of those units which were only built a couple of years ago is only fair.
Some of them are in fair condition, most of them are not. But the biggest impact was with the ones that had the fair condition.
Those.
What qualifies them to be in fair condition when they're?
We sometimes use it as an assessment tool, but fair could be if the roof needs to be repaired. We don't go inside the homes. If with the shingles are a mess, we only go out and look at the actual sales. So if we see that there's been no permits pulled, we have to go on the best information available.
But that's my question. They're almost brand new. How could they have the type of conditions you'd expect to see in a unit that was decades old?
Yeah, it was built in 1982.
Oh, sorry. Never mind. I was confusing it with the other development there.
Right, so this is the Bighorn confirmed that's in Idaho Springs.
Correct.
right?
Bighorn IS, yep.
Okay,
Oh, right. And then we have Bighorn Crossing.
Right.
which is in Georgetown.
Yeah,
Reasonable
these
mistake to make.
are the west end. No, these are
This is,
the east end.
yeah, on Riverside, behind Starbucks.
Right. I'm thinking of Miners Manor or whatever it is on the west end. So, yeah. Is that? Never mind. So your recommendation is to
Go with the values with the comparables,
the comparables.
which is a loss in tax revenue of the $3,000. Overall, 60 properties.
And is the least likely to be challenged. If it is challenged,
That is correct.
Most likely to hold up.
That is correct. And will hold up in the BAA.
And do you feel anything else we do will be successfully challenged at BAA if somebody objects, if they appeal?
I would run comparables anyway.
That's what you'd have to do to defend it, is to do what you've already done.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we'd end up here.
And just one additional thing, from what I understand, the reason that this wasn't caught initially was partially due with software issues and updating our system. Maybe you could explain to the board how this won't repeat itself.
Okay, well, in order to come up with numbers, I do a regression analysis and we use a system called SPSS. It's an independent system on my desktop. And I don't see those overall numbers. I only see the sales at that point. So then the system, I put those numbers into my Eagle system, which is my assessor system, and that sets values then to the condos and townhomes. I wouldn't have seen it unless it was protested. And that's how we discovered the problem. Somebody protested their value in the Bighorn area.
And then you dug in and saw that it had been a blanket
Correct.
thing that happened across the board.
And his protest wasn't even legit. He was saying his value was too high and the value was $106,000. And he wanted a $200,000 value.
And this might be, like a work session at a later date. We could talk about, in statistical analysis, it's not uncommon to, run checks on the data and say, did we have a bunch of properties reduced? Like this is our boundary of expectations, and we're gonna run an analysis of this data that goes outside of those boundaries of our expectations.
Yeah, scan for stuff outside on the edge of the bell curve, one way or the other.
Yeah, I would almost be curious to see like something like that run on the data now, just to see if there's like on the data for this assessment, just to make sure that we know that this is indeed limited to these properties. Because, I mean, have you run anything like that?
No.
Okay.
To make sure it didn't happen
I think-
somewhere else.
I mean, that's,
Well, I ran percentages for the state and it was residential, overall residential with an increase. I believe it was overall 35% increase in Clear Creek County for residential, which was kind of in tune with some of the other counties.
So as the board, George, when you're talking about this, are you thinking more of a kind of a routine spot check where we need to check random? It's kind of a safety measure.
yeah, I mean, if you say my expectation is that a property's value should have increased between 0 and X%. And I'm gonna run an analysis that flags every property whose assessment came outside of that expectation. Right? And I don't know the way that like what your data management software looks like, but I have experience with other versions of data management software, and they all have some kind of a tool like that, right? Whether it's Microsoft Excel or regression analysis software that flags like, here's what the regression analysis shows, and here are the outliers.
Right. What's outside the,
And we have to have a medium of 0.95 to 105 for the overall sales, which calculates the values to the beds, to the baths, to the square footage. So we're required to have that median. And then we also have to have a COD as well, which is the coefficient of dispersion.
Right.
So we have those checks and balances that we have to be within those guidelines.
Yeah, I
And
think-
is that, go ahead, Sean.
I think we're talking about two different issues here, right? One is how do we resolve the known issues? And the other one is let's make sure there are no more unknown issues. And I think we can kind of handle those separately, right?
We can, and the reason that I'm asking the question now is because you could argue that you want to really be sure that you know that this is the only problem before you start sending out adjustments. Maybe that's a bad argument. Maybe you'd say, no, let's deal with this now. We'll deal with issues that we find later.
And as I
That's what I
said,
think.
sorry.
So if we find out, if we find out some more information later, I don't think it's going to change, in my mind, it won't change my decision that I'm prepared to make today about these specific properties.
Okay.
And through our protest process with 624 protests, we didn't see any other issues but this one.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean they're not there.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
No, but among those who did protest, what you're saying is this problem did not show up among any of the other 624 at all. which
That is correct.
And I agree with Sean, it doesn't prove they're not out
Correct.
there. But
Yeah, I mean, the reason this one showed up is because someone made an error and actually already got a good deal and wanted an even better one.
Right. Which you can't really count on.
Right.
yeah. So maybe that narrows down the ones that you want to do the analysis on, but
Okay, but, oh, sorry.
as opposed to the whole body of every property in the county.
I agree with Sean, probably, and I'm sure you do too. I saw you kind of nodding like, yeah, let's deal with one issue at a time.
Well, let's deal with this issue today for sure, so that it's
Yeah.
crossed off the list. I'm not saying we shouldn't do. I find both of your concerns about the possibility that it could have existed somewhere else. And when we talk about you've done a good job of identifying where it probably went wrong. What were the 2 or 3 factors that contributed to it? And, your learning curve is only one of those factors. There's a couple of others there. So where else might those factors exist? And if there's a way to ferret it out and do at least a partial analysis on the high risk areas that we think, well, is there a place out there are there other places similar to this where this could have happened? It might cut the workload down from, doing a countywide analysis of all properties, but the other side of it is doing the analysis itself and just looking for outliers isn't like a real in-depth thing. And it'll show if there's some stuff that's way outside way outside the line on the scatter chart,
Right, like having had their values reduced.
Right.
Okay, well, so I think I agree that going with reassessing based on comparables is better than going back to 2022, and that's what you're recommending, right?
Yes.
Yep. Because that's where we're going to go to anyway next.
Yes.
Okay, so what do we need from us?
Presumably, just one other comment on that though, presumably other situations, if undiscovered, would only come to light if there's been an increase in the assessment and it's challenged, at which point the assessor goes back, checks these challenges, and determines whether or not there was a miscalculation. Presumably, any increases, though, already have comparables done, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So, that being said, I just want to make sure that that's understood.
Ergo my comment a moment ago
Yeah.
about maybe this narrows down where we need to look.
Exactly.
Because few people protest decreases.
Exactly. So what we would need is a motion to approve the valuation adjustment for Bighorn Townhomes, Idaho Springs, as submitted in the packet. And the properties that are listed in the packet are delineated, so just reference the materials in the packet.
And do we actually have 2 things we need to deal with? One is a specific case of a protest, and then the other one is how we handle the entire package. So do we need 2 motions, 2 different things to deal with this or not?
My understanding is there's not a protest at this point.
No.
Okay. All right, I withdraw that comment. And I'll entertain a motion.
I make the motion that Peter articulated a moment ago.
Got it?
Second.
That we go with the comparables.
Yes. And the change in value adjustment.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Beth, I'll get you the letters that I wrote. So if you guys want to review the letters before I mail it out, and I don't know if we need a resolution.
Okay, we do not need a resolution.
Beautiful. Okay, great. And I will be taking some classes on regression analysis with the state.
Excellent.
Cool.
Should be
Thanks,
fun.
Don. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Those are my favorite classes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's why I'm a county manager.
I love looking at scatter charts. I just think it's so funny and the way people can cherry pick data to say, oh, this is the year I want to compare it to this year in the future in order to prove what I want to believe, Okay.
With math is like, I'll just skip.
Got lies, damned lies, and statistics.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is consideration of approval of Colorado County's incorporated legislative issues submittal, Brian Bosshart, and I'm sure others have comments.
Yeah, I need to start putting your guys' name down on these items that are
Oh,
really
wait,
yours.
wait. I have to back up a little bit. But Peter, I would like for Peter to read into the record as early as possible, which is now,
Okay.
because we can't go earlier than now.
So we did add an executive session. It's been added to the agenda, it just hasn't made the online version, but I'll read it into the record. Pursuant to CRS 24640224B for the county attorney to meet with the Board of County Commissioners for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specifically questions concerning conflict waivers and legal representation. Thank you.
Okay. And we'll be bringing that up at the end of the regular session here.
I have two documents in writing. Megan, would you, they should be in your inbox. Would you print them, please, and then maybe forward them to Sean and Randy?
So print both of these?
Yeah.
Oh,
And while they're,
I can't get my email.
I'll print 2 copies then.
Let me try again. Maybe something's fixed by now.
maybe these guys want printed copies, I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead and print like 5 or 6 copies.
Do you have my personal email?
I don't. Wait, I might.
EmpireSailor1948 @gmail.
Okay.
Are they printing now?
Yes.
Okay.
How long is your email out? I got an email at 8:29.
Well, I'm getting them on my phone, but I'm not getting them on my.
Oh,
Yeah, it's I think 365 is down, so people that are using the old Outlook can still get on it.
See, that's why.
I was gonna refrain from saying that because I knew he would say something. All right, let me. Forward this.
Something went wrong.
Empire Sailor at what?
EmpireSailor1948 @gmail.
Okay. And then I'll send it to Sean too.
careful guys, I'm drinking coffee. I'm gonna start getting all jumpy.
I thought you came in jumpy. You're gonna get jumpier.
I came in excited.
That's pretty much the same deal.
I woke up early and have been cooking on ideas.
He's got some proposals.
Okay. Sean, I just sent you that email if you want to look at it.
Okay.
You should give it to Randy, but we also printed it.
Thank you, Beth.
Got it.
Thanks, Beth.
Betcha.
Sorry, I kind of printed them out of order. Thank you.
Got my John Fetterman going on today.
You've got your what?
John Fetterman going on today.
Yeah. He was standing next to Biden and everybody else was wearing suits and he had some stained hoodie on. It was amazing.
Who was that?
Senator,
Senator Fetterman out of Pennsylvania.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like 50% larger than any other human nearby, which makes the whole thing look even stranger.
Yeah.
So is there three? 1, 2, and then 3?
Yes.
3 items, okay.
Okay, so I think maybe I will start with what you have in front of you is a CCI legislative issue form for the unincorporated shooting bill. And then you have some concepts, county taxation concepts for consideration that have not yet been put into a legislative issue form. But I know other counties are sort of getting consent on ideas and filling out the forms later, and I think that's fine. So that this can be our last meeting before submittal. The process does require unanimous consent from the board for an issue to be submitted. And I know that's our goal anyway on this body, that we search for unanimous consent. So should we start with the shooting one?
Sure.
They are due July 7th, just.
Thank you. Yes, and they're due July 7th, and I'm happy to, proceed with finalizing drafts based on feedback I hear today if we move forward with them. So the shooting bill, I know we discussed this already once. I've been looking at the state of law in Texas, and I need to correct the record. Not the record, this isn't a hearing, but I need to make a correction from what I told you all in Commissioner Update a couple meetings ago. The state of the law in Texas is not that, there's not a statewide prohibition on shooting on private property. What there is county authority to prohibit shooting on private property. They use what I think is a cleaner approach than trying to measure and map density. What they say in Texas is counties have this authority on subdivided lots that are less than 10 acres. So if you look at item 4 of this form, proposed solution, the first paragraph is directly pulled from the Texas law. In Texas, it is section 229.002 of that's their county section. Oh, no.
It actually shows up as 5 on, but yeah, immediately following 4, the first paragraph after 4, which is.
Oh, yeah,
5,
that's a memory error. Thank you.
Yeah, that's just hit and return instead of control return. Shift return.
So yeah, it says, and you can read it. It says to promote public safety, a board of county commissioners, they use different language, of course. It's like a county court or something.
Commissioner's Court.
County commissioners court. Thank you. May prohibit or otherwise regulate the discharge of firearms on lots that are 10 acres or smaller and are located in the unincorporated area of the county in a subdivision. That feels to me, some of the feedback that we got from other counties, and Sean, this is to your point that if we don't have support from other counties, we're not going to be successful. Some of the feedback I got from other counties was that they didn't love the idea of having an argument about the discharge of firearms on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis, right? Which is what you have to do under the old concept. You'd have to create a map for every neighborhood that makes the density and a separate finding for every neighborhood that makes the density. This would allow us to just say, if you're on a subdivided property and you're a certain size or smaller. As I read it, we could choose 10, or we could choose 2, or we could choose, whatever we want to choose. The thing I also like about this is that may prohibit or otherwise regulate gives a lot of flexibility, so that if you're in a county and you want to say, you know what, actually, I'm only interested in saying you can't shoot at exploding targets like tannerite, or we want to prohibit the use of, weapons above a certain caliber. You would have that kind of flexibility. And then what's below that is lifted from last year's House Bill 1165. Just saying that before we enact that, we need to hold a public hearing. We discussed that last session. We need to discuss other remedies or measures we've undertaken. I think that was an amendment that Dylan Roberts asked for last year. And I think it might be better to give him the opportunity to ask for that again this year. And then it has all of those exemptions that came out of the stakeholder process for last year. Not regulating, the exemptions are a peace officer acting within the scope of their duty, indoor shooting gallery, on a qualifying shooting range, person hunting, person doing livestock management, basically protecting themselves from animals. And this is confusing because there's a bunch of line numbers in there, so it reads a little funny. But that's what Texas does. I'm tempted, probably not within the CCI process. I'm tempted to shop with legislators this proposal and a proposal that would be just county statewide prohibition based on lot size. That might be something that legislators get more excited about and, would solve that problem.
I was writing down notes. I was thinking about what you said right before that. The lot size is the one that you are tempted, you said, to go with.
Well, I think the appropriate proposal to see if it can gain support at CCI is authorizing county authority. I'm curious about whether legislators would get more excited about, rather than giving counties authority, just doing it.
Making it statewide.
Just making it statewide. And my intent after a conversation with Rep. Amable is to kind of shop both concepts with legislators. As far as CCI, I think it would be unwise to propose both concepts. I think this is the proposal that, control. Yeah, I mean, it becomes a local control issue if you're talking about a statewide prohibition on use of property. It's not a local control issue that would upset me, but. So I don't know. Yeah, there we go. What are our feedback? What are our thoughts? What questions?
I agree with the approach. I like the idea of giving legislators the opportunity to weigh in and give guidance in terms of what should start in CCI that's going to be most likely to pass.
I think, so as I understand you, Sean, what you're saying is to have the latitude to have this either be to evolve once under discussion, either into a statewide law or into a county level of a permissive law that allows counties to do it rather than just making a state law that says here's what you can and can't do. And so the catches to that are, of course, that as you talk about different ideas like exploding or, targets and stuff like that, that once it becomes a state law, they have to provide that specificity within the law. That's where it's going to have to be negotiated at the outset. So we no longer have that flexibility after the fact. In a way, I kind of like that. In a way, it might also be really hard to sell at the county level at CCI, make it even harder when they think about local control and they don't have the ability to simply say, well, it's just this we're trying to do, or it's just that we're trying to do county by county. Looking at the sizes, the 10 acres is about 220 yards by 220 yards. when it's completely square, which none of our properties are, or very few of them are. But in general, what that means is anything that's 10 acres or more in one dimension is going to be at least 220 yards, which is starting to be a pretty safe distance within which people can set up both something in a place that doesn't disturb their neighbors too much in terms of sound, as well as being safe enough to be able to find terrain that gives you a reasonable backstop. One other thought about the size, though, is that, for example, in a lot of Colorado counties, including ours, there's a typical traditional size of a mining claim that when it's not unbroken, or when it's not broken by other mining claims, is a 5-acre claim. It's 150 feet by 1,500 feet, and 1,500 feet, of course, if they happen to shoot in that, you can make one argument that says if they happen to shoot in that direction of the length of the claim, then it makes it really easy to set up a pretty safe range within which to shoot. The other side of it is there's nothing that says they're ever going to set the range up that direction, in which case their properties are only 150 feet, and 150 feet by, if you got another neighbor that's on another property, 100, because there's a lot of mining claims that are parallel to each other. So if somebody shooting that way, it's almost like being in the city again. So I think
somebody's firing live ammo in their neighborhood, they're not necessarily going to be pointing it in the right direction every time.
yeah, that's my point. That's my point. So I think that the 10 acres I find kind of appealing, but I think giving the legislature the opportunity, because it is going to be going to the legislature anyway, and it will be their discretion to decide whether to make it permissive or whether to set the rules and make it. I kind of like the 10 acres, and I like giving the legislature what they're going to have anyway, which is the ability to make their own decision about what they want the legislation to look like.
Okay. I think that makes sense. And the 10 acres is, in Clear Creek County's context, unnecessarily large,
Right.
to your point. And coming out of Texas, the land use history of Texas is a lot different, right? Big agricultural lots, I'm assuming. I'm not a historian, a Texas historian, but however, the subdivided, saying that it has to be subdivided would make a lot of mining claims not eligible.
Exactly.
And that's something that for us to wrestle with. I mean, I think the thing I like about saying a subdivision is there's a link to counties have authority to create problems that they don't have the authority to solve by creating, for example, 3rd-acre lots, hundreds of 3rd-acre lots right next to each other in a subdivision, right? Known as St. Mary's Glacier or Alice. So we have the authority to create the problem. We don't have the authority to solve the problem. So there's like a tie to legal authority we have that I like having it there. I think there are people in our neighborhood that would be on both sides of the fence as to whether we should have the authority to do this based on size alone, right? And not subdivision status. I know when we were working on this bill last year's House Bill 1165, a lot of folks came to me and wanted to know the density of their neighborhood, wanted to know, wanted to see this authority be used in their neighborhood. And my comment was consistently the board has a commitment to try to obtain this authority and use it in a single neighborhood, right? Like that's not to say we wouldn't consider other things later. But there are a number of people out there that will land on both sides of that fence if we decide we'd rather not propose the additional layer of a subdivision. What are our thoughts on that?
Well, there are two we're trying to be pragmatic, and there are different ways we can be pragmatic. There's political pragmatism, and then there's ballistic pragmatism. And so therefore the word subdivided, since I heard you first say at the beginning of the conversation, kind of bothered me, because we would have a lot of small kind of pieces of mining claims that people own in areas of the county, some of which have been pretty heavily developed, and not necessarily throughout the entire area, but where there'll be a pocket of 4 or 5 of them that are really close together. And so by taking out the word subdivided, we allow all kinds of properties that create that ballistic problem, of too many people too close together. We allow it to be able to apply even-handedly to everyone in the county, regardless of whether they have subdivided or not somewhere in their property description.
Yeah.
And so I get that the political pragmatism you're looking at is that you're trying to figure out who's going to be for it, who's going to be against it based on that idea of subdivision. Some people will say, I wanted to say subdivided because I'm in a subdivision. I wanted to give strength to my community. And others would argue, well, I'd like it to apply to my community as well. And because there's a bunch of us that live close together, but we were never subdivided since these mining claims were established. And so we haven't, that ability to create safety does not extend to us. So I think we really need to think about what's the size of the property and, kind of press that direction. That's my own take.
The other thing, that makes sense. The other approach, as I was looking through Texas law, they have another thing that we can incorporate into this that might make sense, which is to talk about distance from a neighboring property. You could add on lots that are 10 acres or smaller and located in an unincorporated area, or lots or shooting in a location that's less than 300 feet from a neighboring private property, right?
I think the problem with that one is sort of like we already have both with sound and with what people are reporting to us, and we don't have the ability to walk onto the property and measure it. Or, you know what I'm saying? We're having a real problem if you create a distinction like a condition that needs to exist in that property based on the person's choice of how they set up their space. And if you don't have due cause to walk onto their property, to track, a warrant or something like that to walk onto their property, to be able to get a measuring tape out and measure how far their point of fire is from the neighbor's property, or the target is from the neighbor's property. And that's another question to be settled. I think we're setting up a whole lot of stuff that we would have a hard time enforcing, which is what our whole problem is now, is the laws. You mentioned these 3 laws up front, and there's problems with enforcing them. And part of those problems come with getting somebody on the property to be able to enforce it. And if we make it a condition of, you can do it there, but only if you satisfy these conditions, we're right back where we started. That's what I think.
And I was thinking about having the language so that it adds to the number of properties that you could have this authority on, instead of creating another condition.
Understood. I'm just trying to think about how it plays out when you try to apply the law.
No, it's a reasonable point. I don't know how they enforce that in Texas.
Are we going down a bit of a rabbit hole? It seems like we have consensus on the concept. I don't know that we need to hammer out all the details right now, do we?
A good point Sean makes, because it's going to go to the legislature and they're going to debate all this stuff.
Okay. Well, yeah, if you all have my intent was to socialize those 2 concepts with you to understand if you guys have bright lines as I shop this around before July 7th.
By the way, I look at this maybe a little bit differently than that. I look at this not that I'm endorsing it, but that I am okay with it going on to a larger body for them to just give it the up or down vote. Because a little preview, I don't endorse the county tax initiative because I think it's kind of amounts to no more than seeing a fat wallet and going after it.
Okay. Yeah, and then, of course, I would love on the shooting topic. I know last year was a bill that you supported and were prepared to testify for. I would love to be drafting a bill that
we could do
that meets a similar threshold for you.
Yeah, I don't anticipate any issues with this particular one when it comes to that.
Thank you. Then I don't think we need a motion or anything. I think
It is written as an action item. Understanding that CCI wanted to ensure you had consensus.
Has this
Oh,
proposal?
yeah, we do need it. CCI requires that it's approved by the entire board to pursue these legislative items. So we should just have a blanket motion that says we approve these two items for George to draft language and get turned in. We have board approval of introducing these through CCI to the legislature.
Okay, cool. So should we move on to the taxation concepts and then
Sure.
take a motion, or were you saying you want a motion on the shooting bill separate? I'm happy with whatever.
Yeah, I'm happy. Either way. Okay.
Do it as one motion.
Okay.
Okay, so let's talk about the taxation.
Okay, two county taxation concepts. The broader context here is I have a bill title in mind that's called authorizing fair county tax proposals. I use the word fair because the current tax proposal authority we have is a set of taxes that are regressive in nature. So yeah, so that, and I think the unfair nature of the tax proposals we're currently authorized to make is part of why counties struggle to get tax proposals passed. And so the two specific concepts that I want to submit to CCI, who knows what their bill titles will be, right? Because we've got one thing is like trying to figure out what the legislature wants, and then the other thing is socializing ideas in CCI. And if there's something that really gets legs at CCI, then that's an indicator that we, maybe want to run with it. So the first one is actually not, wouldn't fall under that bill title, right? This would be authorizing a short-term rental property taxation equity fee. And there's a little bit more context I'll share with you, but basically there's been a lot of conversation at the legislature for years about changing the status of the assessment status of, did we lose Sean?
And we just turn off this.
Okay. Changing the assessment status of short-term rentals from residential to commercial so that they can be taxed at a commercial rate. I believe there's sound logic behind that because you tax businesses at a commercial rate because they drive impacts that are different than the impacts that residences drive. I believe that would be law today, if not for the complications with assessing properties as commercial with the assessor's office and their systems, and 64 different assessors use 20 or so different systems, and would really struggle to match up. Like if you think about a 2-year cycle and something's a short-term rental for 9 months and all of the workload associated with verifying and changing the status and all that stuff and trying to make that work with software systems, some of which are, still undeveloped from the 80s. So I believe that's why this is not law today, right? Rather than try to do that and drive chaos in the assessor's office, instead we get authority to impose a fee. You get the information from our planning department that does the licensing, because now we have licensing authority. And you impose a fee that equals the difference between what they're paying at a residential rate and what they would pay at a commercial rate.
And that would be like a commercial operation impact fee in lieu of rezoning to commercial because you're allowing them to engage in a commercial activity on a residential property. And that could be, it's possible that could extend to more than short-term rentals if that's the rationale behind it. Because there are people who run welding shops on their residential property as an example and impact their neighbors that way too, probably more than a lot of short-term rentals do. And I do think that it's a good idea to not, because I believe that people who are operating in that manner should be taxed at a commercial rate all along, except for the one thing is that you can decide that you're a short-term rental this month and that you're not next month. And it will create havoc with the idea of people moving in and out of the short-term rental. Our laws may change in the future within the county. We may choose to not have a cap on short-term rentals in the future Board of County Commissioners, which means that people could be going in and out of the short-term rental market pretty willy-nilly, just based on their experience, what they're having. I know people that have done that, and decided to do that. And so if that's the case, then you're right, it would create havoc for the assessors to continually be able to track down everybody that's in the short-term rental market and do a reassessment. And it usually happens on an annual basis on a given date or every 2 years when things switch over. How does that, when we're doing 2-year reassessments, how does this play out when you've got people going in and out of short-term rental business like that? An impact fee that is attached to the permit itself, and they have to have a permit to operate, and then they give up their permit if they don't. And so they stop paying that annual fee, I presume, which would be similar to the amount of property taxes, the property tax difference for that year.
Yeah.
Is the way it would be done on an annual, either when they get the permit, they recognize that their annual fee is the same. Now, somebody else may play the game that says, okay, for 2 days out of the year, I'm not a short-term rental or something.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we know like there's a reason that we have a lodging tax, right? The reason that we have a lodging tax authority is that we know that the size of your lodging sort of approximates the size of your tourism impact. And lodging drives impacts all over the county, right? It drives recreational impacts in the woods, which creates wildfire risk and other things, and just resource degradation. It drives traffic on our roads. It drives all of the impacts that we struggle to manage, including running the short-term rental program itself. We know that we have increased calls to sheriff's offices when you have a short-term rental guest rather than and this isn't to say short-term rentals are all evil and need to go away. This is to say we need the resources, just like any other commercial business. We need a higher tax rate in order to, meet the service demand that they create. So I ran like a back of the napkin calculation for what it would mean to Clear Creek County if short-term rentals, the 200 or so short-term rentals, were paying a commercial tax rate. Using an average property tax payment for a home of $2,000, which I think is probably fairly low. I'm happy to throw a different number in there if people want to see a different number. And the ratio between the commercial assessment rate and the residential assessment rate, which is 4.2. If you're commercially assessed properties pay a 4.29 higher.
4.29 times the commercial.
4.29 times the residential rate. Thank you, Randy. So you multiply those together, and the revenue potential in Clear Creek County is $1.7 million. I know, I think that's a really meaningful number for us to be able to have services to address the impacts that we're seeing. And so I think this is like a really high value proposal for us to make. I think it's very fair. I know from the books of a short-term rental operation, and I'll just share the books on my operation. When I ran a short-term rental in Idaho Springs, it amounted to a part-time job worth of work, and it was still growing. I didn't hit my occupancy potential, but I was earning $40,000 a year, and for a part-time job, right? And so what I know is that like paying an additional $3,000-$4,000 in property taxes. Let me be accurate about those numbers. 2 times 4, paying an additional $8,000 would have made it less valuable a business for me, and would have totally, I could have accommodated it. Many of these short-term rentals will find that it's still worth it for them to do it. And this also fits into a policy goal, right? Which is to have the right incentives for things. And what we're seeing is long-term rentals be converted to short-term rentals. Sean, to your point about we need proposals that other counties can get behind. A lot of other counties are have a huge problem and are spending dollars out of their general fund to pay short-term renters to become long-term renters. Summit County has a proposal to offer a property tax rebate to people that are long-term renting their property rather than short-term renting their property. And so this also sort of helps build on the right set of incentives for our housing to be used as long-term rentals, which provides employees, et cetera. We know we have problems in our labor market. Short-term rentals aren't the only source of that problem, but they are an important source of that problem. And creating the right incentives is a big part of what we try to do as policymakers. So let me stop the filibuster. That's kind of like all of the information around this
I'm
pitch.
sorry, were you talking?
Yeah, right. I had a cup of coffee. And so I mean, what's your feedback? What do you think about this proposal?
A couple of clarifying questions. In the past, we've often made some distinction between whether the short-term rental was owned by a non-resident and operated purely as a business versus a short-term rental where one of the 70 million empty bedrooms in the United States was being used to make some money and not impact the housing stock. Does this proposal make any distinction between those two user groups?
That's a good point. All right, and Sean, would that question be relative to, I know we have tried to make a distinction between those who live in their short-term rental as an example versus those who do not. We still have people that move here, become residents, buy up 5 or 6 houses and live in one of them. So as opposed to owned by a resident of the building that's subject to the tax, or owned by a person who's simply a resident of the county, is an important way to understand. That's something important for me to understand your question. I think it's real important that if people are living in a home and they're trying to, for example, in retirement, supplement their ability to remain retired by renting a portion of their house out or something like that, that's a little different situation than someone who's buying up, 5 or 6 homes in a subdivided area of the county and then short-term renting them all out and effectively running a dispersed hotel.
Right. And, I don't want to overcomplicate things, but I just used George's example, right? You lived there, you had the ability to rent out a room. I would argue you did not really create any meaningful impacts that the county had to fund. So charging a person like, 2017 George Marlin $8,000, I can't really connect the dots on that one.
I think that's fair. I mean, I would say there's less impact when you have somebody in the home, not zero. I mean, I did have the police get called on one person, but you make a good point. My answer to you is that it should, and it does now.
Yeah.
And I mean, our permitting process can handle that, right? Because we make that distinction.
Yeah, but fundamentally, I do agree that if I go buy a house in DLD or St. Mary's and I have no intention of ever living there, my only intention is creating a business and to make profit from that business, that is, that looks a lot like commercial use to me.
Right. I think we're saying the same thing in different words.
So I mean, not like we're drafting legislative language here, but I just changed what I've written. It says authorize counties to impose a fee on short-term rentals that is equal to the difference, blah, blah, blah. I'm just saying short-term rentals that do not have a long-term occupant.
Yeah, or not owner occupied or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Could work
I think
too.
that's fair. And by the way, my statement earlier about probably not supporting this, I didn't read it carefully. I thought this was another reincarnation of one that we talked about in the past, which was essentially a universal sales tax applied to unincorporated areas just because they lived in an unincorporated area that didn't have any specific limitations or focus like this one does.
Yeah, I chose not to push on that issue this year. We have non-legislative ways to make that work if we want to. The idea never really got excitement. I don't even know if it would pass.
Yeah, we certainly didn't have unanimity within the county, and outside the county, we certainly didn't have unanimity either about
But
that one.
I do thank you, Sean, for letting me go have fun with that idea. I think you probably knew where it was going to land anyway. It's like, hey, you want to beat your head against a brick wall? Be my guest. So, okay, what I think I hear is that we're good with that concept.
Yeah.
This one is the one that actually fits under a broader concept of ideas. I'm not the only one, but I'm looking for and talking to a lot of commissioners, and at some point I'm going to try to convene. I've also talked to Scott Wasserman with the Bell Policy Center to try to convene, a broad county discussion about identifying tax proposals that meet the following criteria, right? County level tax proposals that can be authorized legislatively, as in not requiring a statewide ballot measure, just legislative authorization for us to make proposals that are not regressive, right? That allow us to more narrowly target the creation of service demand to meeting that service demand. This is where the recreation services sales tax falls into that category, right? That one you'll see I'm not moving forward with that one right now because I think that that's pretty narrow. The replacement for that concept is authorize an occupational tax for counties. I know I've talked to you about this before. Municipalities have the authority to do an occupational tax. They use that authority to design tax proposals on industries that have an inordinate service demand on the government, as more than general business activity. In Clear Creek County's context, maybe that's recreation service providers. If you are in Adams County, where you have, asthma rates that are out of control because of Suncor and polluting industries, maybe you target polluting industries so that you can, deal with the impacts of the pollution. So I think like what this does is instead of it gives us a tool that we can use here to approximate our issues, and a tool that they can use in other counties to deal with the issues they have there. Municipalities use this tool in a number of different ways. Examples include lodging establishments, bars. A number of municipalities have an occupational tax on bars because they saw that bars drive law enforcement calls and domestic violence cases, et cetera. So I think the occupational tax is a good place to start. And maybe the proposal that we bring into CCI to get the conversation going about, what fits in your county. Is there a different concept? The other concept that I know is being worked on out there is some kind of a second home or vacant home fee or tax. That idea is not well cooked, but might fit into this, right? Where you have, it could be argued that vacant homes by what happens in the real estate market when people from out of state with enough money to buy properties with cash is what's driving up and causing our property taxes to double, or our property values to double in a couple of years, is definitely driving service demand. And so that's a proposal that's out there too that I wanted you to know about that I think fits into this bucket as well. But let's talk about the occupational tax, because I think I would just state that to CCI. What do you all think about that concept?
First thing I would note is your example about alcohol. I mean, that's a classic regressive tax, right?
I mean, I don't know if bar sales is regressive. Taxing you know,
Depends on what bar you're at.
taxing, I mean, what am I trying to say here? What I'm trying to say here is that if you're worried about your budget, there are different ways to get alcohol than being in a bar.
Yeah, but my
That's
my
not, I
point
mean,
is,
that's kind of
it's complicated.
that's a non sequitur anyway, right?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I kind of go back to what I said a few weeks ago. I mean, if taxing a second home was something that is going to receive widespread appeal, an easier path might be to plant this idea in the heads of the Summit County commissioners or Eagle County or a county who stands to benefit orders of magnitude more than we will, and who have a lot more resources than we do too. But that's not to say I'm opposed to you throwing it up to CCI and seeing what happens. I'm not.
Yeah, and I don't think I'll make that proposal. I think it's coming anyway. And I was shocked to see that Clear Creek County's vacancy rate actually went down. It is not what the vacancy rates are in the rural resort area. We just have a different housing market. We've got high value jobs that are drivable.
We have no inventory, basically. Our inventory hasn't changed markedly since I've been here.
Yeah. And we're not Aspen. We're not Breckenridge. We don't have billionaires that are trying to.
Well, a couple, but it only takes a couple to mess up the math.
Yeah. So anyway. So what do you think? I interrupted you a second ago.
If we're talking about the occupational tax first, but you did just move on to the second home fee tax again. I guess the question is, which one are you asking for right now?
I'm asking for the occupational tax.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's similar to the tax on short-term rentals. It's almost the same thing as an STR tax. It's an operation that people are doing. It's creating an impact. It's a similar concept. Thinking about this leads one to think about that. What about those places that are already commercial, but have an undue impact on resources based on the nature of their commercial operation? And I guess the devil's in the details on that. Whose ox is it that gets gored? I'm actually not staking out a position one side or the other, trying to argue for or against it, other than maybe to say it's a pretty sticky wicket. It's a rough place to try to choose what those things are and identify them. So the method, the criteria through which we establish which commercial operations need to pay an additional tax on top of their commercial property taxes, whether they're renting or, owning the property, either one, it comes out the same. The devil's going to be in those details about who we've identified, and who identifies them and how they're identified.
And you land on the reason that I hesitate on this concept. And you almost make an argument to make a more broad proposal to CCI. In order to do an occupational tax, you probably need to know who's out there, which means you probably need business licensing authority, which counties don't have.
Yeah, there's that.
And so this bill would probably need to also give us business licensing authority. We made a run at that a couple of years ago and couldn't get there. You almost caused me to say, and I know I don't have this in writing, but to ask you guys for permission to propose just the broader bill title, right? Authorizing county fair tax proposals, and write out some concepts and leave it at that.
I think you're talking to switch over to a county business licensing authority.
No, I'm saying just make the concept more broad as we propose it to CCI. Just the concept is to authorize fair county tax proposals, talk about this one, talk about the recreation services tax, and just kind of list a menu of concepts that are out there.
I think then you started to identify the problem, because one thing that Sean says often that I agree with, and I hear lots of people, he's not the first one that coined it. I don't want to give him too much credit, but to just say, when you have a solution in search of a problem, it's like, and we're here to talk about where can we affect the legislature in ways that will help us do things that we need to in Clear Creek County.
Yeah.
And we should actually be thinking about what are the things in Clear Creek County, other than we've mentioned recreation service tax, so the impact on both the environment and, and a lot of times our public infrastructure is also used as staging areas for people that are in business, and they're not operating off their property, they're operating off of our public infrastructure. So if we have places that we can identify that are like that, like we mentioned, the recreational use tax, we we can tangibly see the application for short-term rental. What else is out there that this additional tax would apply to? Would be helpful to know, I think.
Yeah. I mean, of
course, we got July 7th to tell CCI what we want to talk about. So maybe a menu of things and a concept and an idea is about the best you can do by July 7th. Right. We're not going to talk about it again after today before then.
Here's the problem definition that I have that, to the broader conversation about authorizing fair county tax proposals. The problem definition is this. In Colorado's system fiscal environment, counties have a lot of demands that residential homeowners want to see. They want to see us show up for them on housing issues, on wildfire issues. They want to see us make childcare possible, which is only possible when you subsidize it at the local level. You can look around the state and see that. There's a host of issues that there's not a county in the state that has adequate revenue to confront.
All of those issues you just named require subsidization.
Right.
Subsidization.
At the same time, we see the legislature continue to reduce residential assessment rates because residential property taxation is regressive and unpopular. And what we need, therefore, and we also see that there are some counties that don't aspire to have the revenues to show up on those issues, or maybe don't even have those issues, right? And so whenever the legislature is talking about lowering the residential assessment rate, they have county commissioners that show up and say, this is fine, we don't need the revenue. So the problem definition is you have some counties that have huge impacts and huge problems to deal with, like wildfire and housing, other counties that don't. And so rather than have this statewide conversation about what the residential assessment rate should be, or try to have a conversation about getting a regressive, unpopular tax proposed and passed in your county, you have the option for those counties that have the problems and aspire to solve them to make proposals that are fair and popular that can pass so that we can actually show up for people on these issues. So that's my problem definition.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And let me just state that all of these ideas gain some traction with me. I'm just pointing out some spots in a couple of them that it does create some work for us to figure out whose ox is gored.
Yeah. And I have had conversations with legislators about this, kind of in the wake of them reducing the residential assessment rate again this year. And there's some interest out there in saying, hey, yeah, rather than try to have this statewide conversation where some counties would do good things with this revenue, others wouldn't. Let's authorize the counties that aspire to do this to propose something to their voters. So, I think that there's some interest out there in this approach. And I don't know. Irrational optimism is kind of a job description over here. But I think that this is the way, if you're in Clear Creek County and you've got a $2.9 million budget deficit, which means that, and you historically have not done enough on wildfire, housing, childcare, name the issue, recreation management, you've got a tough problem to solve, right? The answer isn't, I don't think, trying to figure out how to convince people that that their property taxes need to go up. I think it's around having the authority to make a proposal that is more fair and more popular than that.
Okay.
I mean, there's all kinds of philosophical discussions that we're not talking about, like, is it society's responsibility to pay to raise my kids, or is that my responsibility when I had kids? And I'm not weighing in on one side of that or the other, but you're sort of making assumptions about that are universal across all of our taxpayers.
Yeah, right, which is why having it be a county by county conversation is the right one, right? Rather than try to force.
Or a family by family.
Family by family. That just prompted 3 or 4 more comments that I could make that I won't.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And that was not a slam at you, Sean. It just suddenly some humor went through my head about the ways, the different things we could tax.
Yeah, I mean, my point is there's a lot of different stakeholders that we represent, and you're talking about serving a very specific constituency.
I am. I mean, I don't know. I like paying taxes into schools in spite of the fact I don't have children because,
Right.
you know, I think society thrives when our children thrive, right?
I think as a society, we do smarter things when we know more too. And
But
that helps. Education helps with that.
And this is the conversation I want to have with voters, right? And see what voters are excited about.
I think what I'd like to try to do is for us to like corral this conversation into a direction that we can give and approve so that we can make a motion. And so we've kind of, we've talked about a lot of different ways to approach this right now, particularly the occupational tax for counties. I think we're cool with the short-term property tax equity fee, and we are cool with the shooting issue. And then how can we corral the conversation or the ideas around, George, based on everything you've heard, what would you like to do with this concept around occupational and similar taxes, how to round that up into something we can present in a few sentences to the legislators that they can understand and actually do something with potentially.
No, thank you. I've been undisciplined in this conversation.
We all have been. That's not it. I'm just trying to get a rope around all of us right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think our options are move forward within CCI, which is, I walked into the room saying, let's just move forward and propose authorizing an occupational tax for counties to CCI. Conversely, I could be convinced that rather than that, we've moved forward with a broader concept called authorize, fair county tax proposals. And I could draft up, occupational tax for counties would be one of them. I don't think, for the record, that second concept is going to have any legs, regardless of whether we frame it in the broader or the more narrow context. My intent is to socialize the idea.
I think part of the problem is the words occupational tax is confusing and very easily misunderstood.
Weaponized. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, you're saying that because I'm working, my employer might pay a higher tax. And so there's got to be a way to use that fair taxation. I think the titling of the concept we're talking about when you call it an occupational tax is confusing to me the first time I hear it brought up at the beginning of the conversation. It's like occupational tax. Are you saying that welders are going to pay more than electricians or doctors, or where are we going with this? So a way to come up with a title that reflects what it is we're trying to get to would be would certainly make it more sellable, I think, both to the legislature and the public.
Okay, so that's an argument to go with for me to draft up something under the broader concept of authorize more fair county tax proposals.
Right.
Sean, are you okay with that?
Yeah,
Okay. And then we can, I love these opportunities to wax philosophical with you guys. Sorry for taking up your time.
I'm glad.
Okay, so then I'm gonna move that the board is going to submit the shooting in unincorporated areas issue, the STR property tax equity fee issue, and the authorize more fair county tax proposals issue to CCI with one caveat. The STR property tax equity fee may end up getting wrapped up in the Summit County proposal, which I mentioned briefly. Summit County wants to offer property tax rebates to long-term renters. And I'm having a conversation with them about whether both of those ideas are better suited in the same bill. In which case I would not submit this. So I just want you all to know that and ask for permission to not submit this if I think there's a wiser path.
I think there's a liability in here too, in which different counties have different situations going on in their public funding. Okay. And so Summit County's version maybe we'll give up some public funding in order to incentivize, long-term rentals. Whereas Clear Creek County might be saying we need to find a way to raise revenues by disincentivizing short-term rentals. And those are two opposite approaches to trying to accomplish the same goal at the end of the day for housing. And so how those two work together they may not be able to coexist.
Well, not competing, because like good policy involves incentives and disincentives, right? And incentive is about quantity, right? So you can get a little on this side, get a little on that side, maybe make an incentive that actually works.
Well, maybe it's a bill that creates a menu of choices that counties can choose to manage their manage and fund the impacts of short-term rentals.
Yeah. So anyway, so let me try to restate that motion.
actually, real quick, one thing I'm scratching my head about Summit County, subsidizing short-term rentals to long-term rentals seems like throwing more money at an unintended consequence that they created in the first place. Why don't they just reduce the number of short-term rentals?
It's a good question.
I think those cattle got out of the barn and multiplied to great numbers a long time ago. And I don't know I don't know what they do with all of them now at this point. They have built an entire economy around attracting 1 million people to come there and either stay in hotels or stay somewhere and ride on ski lifts, either to do downhill mountain biking or downhill skiing, which is the hugest part of what they do there. And they have a gigantic hotel economy, which is a short-term rental economy. And yet they've attracted so many people that even the hotels can't hold everyone in season. And their second home market seems to thrive as a short-term. So they have so many short-term rentals that existed before they thought about limiting them that they got to put a lot of people out of business to try to limit it. But that's just my gut feel about why they're caught right now. They've built a whole economy around it.
Let me try to restate that so that it's a motion that can, rather than like a motion with some philosophical laxation on it. I move that we authorize the unincorporated shooting county authority to prohibit shooting in unincorporated areas bill, the short-term property tax equity fee bill, and authorize more fair county tax proposals bill to CCI with authority to not submit any of those ideas if we think we find a wiser path.
Yeah, I have a small bit of heartburn about the fare. I mean, it's kind of like the Inflation Reduction Act, which actually threw gasoline on inflation. I mean, fare is relative to who you're talking about and what part of our universe of stakeholders. So I would prefer that we call it something else, but I'm not gonna stop the motion because of that.
Equitable?
Why don't you just call it what it is, short-term rental tax or something?
Well, that's a little different one, talking about going further with that. The fair taxation, the short-term rental is an example of that, that's specific, that we said we want to do. But the other was, the fair taxation is to allow us to go out and look for other places like that where there are disproportional impacts to certain operations, and we need to figure out how to recover the cost of servicing those impacts.
Okay,
And
right.
I don't know what the words are that get there, but that's calling it what it is, I think.
Sean, I'll work on that title.
Okay, that's good.
See if I can come up with something that passes muster. Well, that's not my.
I actually trust you to do it without us calling another meeting, so,
Yeah, I agree.
okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
No.
We don't have.
George, I interrupted in the middle of it, or right before you threw it out there. I think.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second.
Okay, so now we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
related to this, at the June 6th board meeting, you gave me direction to draft a government affairs RFP to find a firm to assist us with the state. So I'm working on that scope of work right now, and I'll be sending that out to each of you individually, so you can get a look at the scope before it ultimately gets before you.
All right.
Approval to put it out, how we're gonna pay for it, et cetera. So just a heads up that it's coming, and I'll be emailing it out to each of you
Okay.
individually.
And depending on how these evolve in the near term, may have some impact on how we evaluate those proposals and the final decision we make coming in. We've got to have something for them to do, so. Okay. With that, I think we have concluded our very brief special business session this morning, but I move that we go into executive session, Peter, for the following purposes.
Pursuant to CRS 246402-4B, for the county attorney to meet with the Board of County Commissioners for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions concerning conflict waivers and legal representation.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 We will now move into executive session. No written minutes will be kept, no decisions will be made, and we will do that immediately following a quick phone call I have to make. And then we will return from that executive session into this regular session, but only for the purpose of announcing the conclusion of that executive session and adjournment. So there's nothing to stick around for in case anybody's online and is interested in hearing more really intelligent stuff later. There won't be.
Sean, I did
Peter, are you gonna send me the Zoom?
I did.
Okay, I don't see it yet, but I'll see you over there.
Sent it about 20 minutes ago.
To my
You.
account now?
Yep,
Where'd you send it to me?
I didn't
So
send it
is
to you.
Office
Oh, it's in
365
there?
still down?
Okay.
I just sent it to him.
Are you using the old version of the email or like the online version of the county email?
I'm online. Yeah, just send, or you can just text it to me, but send me the link and I'll hop on.
Yeah, for some reason.
I'll send it again.
Oh, it's the co.clear.
Yeah, the online version of the county email is down. And if that's what he uses, he won't be able to get it.
So we've concluded our executive session. No written minutes were kept and no decisions were made, and we are now adjourned for the day.
Thank you.